Hey guys, so this morning I saw Fritzy put on this dress and it made me want to talk about something. So, Fritzy, would you like to show them our dress? So, you see this dress here is filled with holes, and it has holes in it because rats ate our clothes. But that's not actually the thing I want to speak about. Let me get out of the way of the sun. The thing I want to speak about is our social conditioning in the West, because here, Fritzy and I have many clothes like this that are ripped and torn and falling apart. And you can just put them on and use them as you wish, that's no problem. And the thing is, here, culturally speaking, no one is ever going to say anything to you if you do that. And somewhere inside your mindset as well, I wouldn't feel comfortable. Here's the funny thing, in the West I wouldn't feel comfortable putting on ripped clothes. And why is that? You know, what has done that to us? Now, there's nothing wrong with Fritzy's dress. It's a beautiful dress. Yes, it has a rip in it, but it still works. It does its job. It's a utilitarian item, but it's also pretty at the same time. Here, no one would ever say anything or judge another person for having ripped clothes on, because they know that people can't afford them. They know that people can't afford to stay on top of their clothes like that, and sometimes they'll repair them when they have the money, but they would never judge another person and look at them and say, have you seen their clothes? They're all ripped and tattered. But from childhood, I've lived in a society where I've experienced that, where they'll say, have you seen the state of that person's child because they're wearing tatty clothes? They must be struggling, you know, have you seen that? They shouldn't be wearing that, or they must be very poor. As if it's something terrible, as if it's some sort of recognition for how good the person is. The fact they're wearing dirty clothes means they're poor, which can only mean that they are not good people somehow. And that conditioning, here's the funny thing about it, that conditioning was brought about by Freud, ultimately, because he's the one who started to create the idea that you can sell items not on a utilitarian basis, but on an emotional, to fulfill an emotional need. So you can use the psychology of a person, you can sell them shoes to fill a want to feel sexy, for example. This stems from Freud's work. Now, I'm not a huge fan of Freud's work, I prefer Carl Jung's. Considering Freud's son, which Freud says it's all about sex, and his own son is a convicted child sex offender, then, you know, it speaks volumes for believing that way, for believing, yeah, the world is just purely about sex and sexually driven. His son is a child molester. He's convicted of it. So, this idea that we've been sold in our conditioning that, you know, you need these nice things on belongs to the West. But here's the other rub of that. That's milking and draining the planet's resources and environment. Because many people in the West who might be quite happy to repair their dress, some people probably do, but most will not. They wouldn't think to repair their children's clothes because they feel that it's not culturally acceptable to do that. So we go about using industry which burns more fossil fuels to create more clothes. And this is one of the problems we face with this crony capitalism that we live in, is that our minds have been programmed into a way where we feel inside society that we must uphold a certain level. And by feeling we must uphold a certain level of stance within society, we also uphold the wealth of others, but we also surrender many of our freedoms to uphold that level. To need to have the money, you must be stuck inside the system. Whereas here, it's okay for your children to run around with ripped clothes on, as long as they're happy, as long as the clothes are washed and clean and they're not filthy all the time, and they have a rip in them, they have a rip in them. People don't have money for new ones, might not have money to repair them. It's just how it is. Of course, people like nice clothes, don't get me wrong, they like new things on. However, it's not frowned upon when a child goes to school with a ripped sweater. In England, it would be frowned upon, and people would say, what's wrong with the child? People would probably even call social services and say this child's being neglected because they're wearing a ripped school uniform when they come to school. They wouldn't think the parents are suffering from severe poverty. They would think that they're being neglected because the parents are not able to earn enough money to keep a societally visual cleanliness that is expected of them. And that dress brought that up in me. It's a funny thing that here It's not an issue. But even for myself, I am conditioned within the West. Some of my ripped clothes that I quite happily wear here, I would feel uncomfortable wearing them in the West. Maybe I'll do an experiment when I'm back in Hamburg in the coming weeks, where I'll wear some of my ripped tatty clothes and see how I feel and speak about it again. So I have a feeling that probably no one would even bother looking, actually, but somewhere inside your mind you would think everyone knows I'm wearing ripped clothes, because as a child I was brought up to see this. We are brought up to see it in society, where we're like, look at their clothes, they're a bit tatty and old, they must be struggling, as if that's a problem, as if that matters, as if that has anything to do with the standing of the type of person they are. Anyone can get sick and anyone can end up in poverty. Anyone in this part of the world are born into poverty. But in the West, many people can have issues. They might not get a good education. They might have had issues as a child. And of course, they raise their own children and they're on benefits, etc. They're not going to have the best of the best. But I know from being raised inside that system that is what happens. We look and we say, yeah, visually their appearance is not suitable for within society. And I honestly think that if a child went to school with a ripped school uniform that the parent didn't know how to repair and couldn't afford a new one, that the school would somehow complain to the parent, or that there would be some sort of feeling that the child was being neglected just because they don't have enough finance to make them look as beautiful as what is required or asked of within the crony capitalist system that I grew up in. So, anyway, much love. Bye, guys.